Try to think of nothing, and you can't. What is nothing? It is that which doesn't exist. Nothingness, or short-term notness, is non-existent. Notness will never exist. Notness never comes. Why does anything exist at all? Well, because non-existence never comes. There has to be an existence because non-existence will never exist. Non-existence will never be. Non-existence is non-existence. Non-existence doesn't exist. So what does exist? Well, if nothingness is the essentially fundamental of non-existent, and really the only, the fundamental of existence is likely the exact opposite. What is the exact opposite of nothingness? It is everythingness. Which is kind of interesting because usually when we would think of the fundamental of existence, we would think of some sort of small particle. But rather, it's the whole. It's the whole as one rather than a piece. There are no parts. Fundamentally. I'll go into this more. What are the qualities of what this everythingness is, or short-term isness, or my Latin terms, which for isness is simnia, simul omnia, the combined everything, and alihil, alium nihil, the different nothing. So that is, simnia is what exists on the fundamental absolute level, and alihil is what does not exist on the fundamental absolute level. So what is simnia? So we know simnia is everything. We can, a lot of this we can take from Parmenides' rationalism. We can say it can't change, because if there was change, that would imply a past which is no longer existing, and a future which is not existing yet. It can't change. It also has to be perfect, because if it was broken in any sort of way, it wouldn't be forever. So it can't change, and it's perfect. It's perfectly the way it should be. It's deterministic, meaning that determinism is fundamentally overall true. But let me get into this deeper, because I'm not saying that we don't have free will. I'm just saying at the absolute fundamental level, determinism is the case. It has awareness, because alihil, which doesn't exist, there's nothing to be aware of. It is, alihil has ignorance, lack of awareness. Simnia has awareness. You have to differentiate awareness, consciousness, and experience. To experience is to experience change. So it's when you have awareness and you are experiencing change. So simnia has awareness, but that awareness does not have experience. Consciousness is what I would consider what we have in this world, which I'll get into. Consciousness is having awareness, being able to experience, and being able to have an input to that experience. So simnia is perfect. It's in stasis, as in it never changes. It's perfect. It's everything that exists. All is one, because it has to be connected therefore what could separate it? Only nothingness. If we were to say it had any parts, this is more Parmenides rationalism, if it had any parts, what would separate it? If we were to say, oh, well, there's multiple types of fundamental existence, okay, then let's say there's two types of fundamental existences. What separates those two things? Is either going to be nothingness, which doesn't exist. See, if we try to use nothingness as a separator, then we're actually counting it as an existing thing. You can't use it as a separator because it doesn't exist. If we're using it as a separator, we're now giving it existence. So, okay, so we know we can't use nothingness. So, okay, if there is two types of fundamental existence, then what else could separate it? Okay, a third thing. But now we have a third thing. What separates that third thing from these other two things? A fourth thing, a fifth thing, a sixth thing, a fifth, seventh thing? It goes on forever. So this Simnia, it's perfect, it's in stasis, it's completely uniform, it has no parts. Technically it has no time, obviously, because it doesn't change. Or I guess you could say it's in an unchanging present. I don't know if I would say it has, I would say it doesn't have spatial dimension. If it does, it would be completely uniform and essentially infinite size. I don't know. It is completely rational because it is connected. Irrational implies a disconnect, a randomness. Randomness is not possible. Even when we use computer programs, we simulate randomness. It's impossible for us to write a computer program that has absolute pure random. We only simulate a randomness. Pure randomness is impossible. That's associated with Alihill. Alihill is randomness. It doesn't exist. Alihill is irrational. It is the separated. Alihill is complete change, whereas Simnia is in complete stasis, never changes, not even for a moment. It's always in stasis. Alihill is always changing. Not even for a moment is it still. Not even for a moment is Alihill in existence. It is always in change. I say that such that you see that it's always in change because it never gets a second to actually settle and exist. That's what I mean. It's probably not a good way to describe it, but just to kind of paint the picture that Simnia and Alihill are opposites. Simnia is self-reliant. It relies on nothing else. If it were to rely on something else, then we'd get that same thing as the parts. If it relied on one thing, then what does that next thing rely on? Another thing, and then another thing, and then another thing. Simnia is self-reliant. It's the perfect machine that has no loss. It's imperfect. You know, we have all these machines and they don't have perfect efficiencies. They have loss to them. Simnia is basically the perfect machine. It has awareness. It has no loss. It is purely rational, so you can almost kind of associate it with computers. It's everything rational because it's everything connected. It's everything combined. It's another way to call it its own self-sufficiency is it is its own fulcrum. It is in balance. Now that's really important. I'll explain in a minute. It is in balance. So here we go into, so if what exists can never change, it's always in stasis, how is this world real? How are we experiencing this world? Well, here's the trick of it. This world isn't completely real. That's not to invalidate it. This world is very valid. Very, very valid. But it is a simulation. It is the perfect simulation. This is the forever temporary, the irrational irrational, the balanced imbalance, the perfect imperfect. This world that we're experiencing right now is the combination of Simnia and Alihill. So why does it happen? How is this world a part of something that doesn't change? Here's why. So since Simnia never changes, it has to be part of its default state that it simulates this world. And because it is uniform, that means that all of our awarenesses are actually an illusionary separation from that. So that means we are all actually Simnia's awareness, experiencing the illusion of separation. So here's why, though. Simnia is everything that exists, and it does everything that it can. Now, when I say does everything, usually that implies change, but being to exist in this fundamental level does not imply a change. Think of it like this. Simnia is everything, doing everything all at once, all combined. So what does that mean? It means it's imbalanced. So think of a point, and it's being tugged on in every single direction all at once. So Simnia is doing everything it can all at once. So even though it's doing everything all at once, it's not actually changing at all. It's in perfect balance. So we have to differentiate this. Even though it's doing everything all at once, its net output is nothing. And that's the secret right there. Simnia is everything, doing everything, all combined, its net outcome is balance. What is balance? Well, its prior cause is everything all at once, but its post effect is nothing. And what is nothing? It is non-existence. But non-existence cannot exist, right? So what's going on here? Simnia's awareness is experiencing nothing. But it can't experience true Alihill. True Alihill doesn't exist. So now this is where we have to get into differentiating absolute from dilute. Absolute Alihill does not exist and will never exist. But this simulated nothingness, this diluted Alihill, which is balance, it's not true nothingness, but it's a simulated nothingness. And so now, this simulated nothingness is as if we're taking the essence of rational, the essence of perfection, and we're giving it to imperfection, and we're giving it to irrational. Simnia is, if we are to metaphorically personify it, Simnia is giving a part of itself to Alihill to let it, quote unquote, come alive. I'm only metaphorically personifying it. Simnia, I don't want to make it seem like a god. It does have awareness, but it doesn't have choice. It is deterministic. But in its awareness experiences nothing, this diluted version of nothing, which is chaos. So essentially, what Simnia is experiencing nothingness. So how do you experience nothingness? It's not true nothingness, it's a diluted nothingness. What is this diluted nothingness? Well, it's, like I said, as if you were to give a little bit of rationality to the irrational. Essentially, it's randomness, it's chaos, it's separation. So, this, by Simnia's own nature, is causing Simnia to experience itself, but separated. Simnia is able to experience all of its potential, all of its different potential existent paths, and all of potential irrational paths as separate beings. And it's necessitated by its own default state that doesn't change. More metaphorical personification. Simnia has everything, knows everything rational by default. So it wants nothing, right? There's nothing else it could ever want. But if we were to think of that again in a different way, Simnia has everything rational, but it doesn't have everything irrational. So Simnia wants the irrational. Simnia wants to learn the irrational. So how do you learn the irrational? You can't rationalize it. You can't follow the logical steps. The only way to learn the irrational is to experience it and empathize it. So this world is where we learn. This is where we, Simnia, experience the irrational and we learn the irrational. But here's the thing about the irrational. It doesn't truly exist, and it's always going to be temporary. We will never be able to fully hold on to it. The irrational needs some sort of memory storage, whereas rational, since we can think of Simnia as like the perfect computer, it knows everything rational by default. It can just easily compute it, right away, instantaneously. It's always computing everything all at once. It doesn't even need memory storage. It just knows it. All it needs is that fundamental rational, and you can follow that. From that fundamental rational, you can follow the steps to every other rational logical step. Blah blah blah. The thing about irrational though is you can't follow any logical steps to it. At least in pure irrational. If there's some rationality to it, you can. And there's no such thing as pure irrational. Basically, what I'm trying to say is irrational needs memory storage and is temporary. So this is the forever temporary, this world. Simnia will always be experiencing this type of universe with randomness. So, new starting, new beings, maybe, I don't know how differentiated it'll be each time. Maybe new laws of physics, maybe totally different. Whatever possible rational, irrational things can even happen. This world had a beginning, and so it will come to an end. Simnia has no beginning, and so has no end. Simnia always is. You have to be able to think outside of time. Simnia has no beginning, and so it has no end. Whereas Alihil never comes, notness never is. Not that which does not exist never will exist. That which exists is always existent. This is the in-between, so this has a beginning and an end. Anyways, yeah, so Simnia wants to learn the irrational. And what it learns at the end is that it can't hold on to the irrational. It realizes, I can't hold on to this, and I don't actually need it. I already am everything that actually exists. I'm already perfect. All of us are. That's the whole thing. We are Simnia. We are Simnia experiencing separate beings. We already are perfect. That's the thing. Already inherently, we are perfect beings at the very deepest portion of our awareness. We are perfect. We are everything all at once. We're just experiencing the illusion as separate beings. And eventually, whatever I imagine it's reincarnation. and then eventually you get to a point where your soul is tempered. Like, eventually you get to a point where your soul has been trained and has enough wisdom to where it goes, oh, that that was great and that was awful, and I know enough now. I realized I've always had all that I've ever needed. I don't need any of this. I can transcend. I can go back and I can be at peace. I can be at balance again. And you recombine back with Simnia and become peace again. And it's probably an insanely different experience than what it is as a human. Um, Anyways, that's my take. I kind of want to clarify a little bit on the simulation. So, Simnia is everything and does everything, which everything all at once creates balance. If you're taking a point, and let's say it's being tugged in every direction equally all at once, it won't move. It has potential to move in all directions. That's a good thing. That's a good way to associate Simnia. Simnia is pure potential of everything. So it is, and this is just a metaphor. It's not actually just a point being tugged in every direction. Although I do think it is pretty good. I think there is a good association with Simnia and like 0 point type stuff, but I have to think about that more. Anyways, Simnia is everything, does everything, all combined, which net outcome is balance. Balance is prior cause, is everything all at once, but its post effect is nothing. So Simnia's awareness is experiencing nothing. Well, nothing doesn't exist, but what we have is an awareness of nothing, and so that awareness can't actually experience true nothingness. So what it's actually experiencing is the exact opposite of that statement. It is, well, here's Alio. Alio is nothing, does nothing, separated. Alio is nothing, does nothing, all that's separated, which is chaos. I'm using chaos as the opposite of balance. It might not be the best word for it, which is imbalance, maybe I should just say. Essentially, the diluted version of that is the awareness experiences a scramble. It's like as if Simnia is looking in a mirror, and instead of seeing a perfect reflection, the mirror is moving all of its facial features all over the place, and it's also separating these facial features. Yeah, Alihill mixes it up. This simulation mixes it up and allows for at least the perfectly possible simulation of random. It's not actual randomness. Pure randomness doesn't exist. But yeah. And I should say, within this illusionary world, I do think free will is, I have to be careful when I say this, it's not absolutely real, but it is dilutedly real. It is simulatedly real. Simnia does not have free will in an absolute scale, but through the simulation, it does. In our separated bodies, we have a combination, well, we have a combination of determinism and free will, and etc. We have a combination of laws of physics, an overall determinism, our free will, our body's default function determinism, and other people's body default determinism, and other people's free will. That's where I think I'll end this one on. I'm going to make more videos, probably even just retrying to explain the Omnil to everyone.